Everyone, it's Aislinn here. This is my March wrap-up. So in March, I read a total of 6.5 books. I'm saying half because I have one book that I got halfway through in March, and I'm still on the fence if I'm going to DNF it or not. So I'll get into that a little bit later in the video. The first book that I read was Loneliest Girl in the Universe by Lauren James. So I enjoyed it. There were some very confusing moments in it, though, for me, I found. Mostly with the timeline of things, because basically the story is about two astronauts go out in space because this possibly inhabitable planet has been found very much like our own, and Earth's overcrowded and polluted and all the problems we have today only magnified. So they're looking to colonize another planet. And a potential candidate is found. So these two astronauts get sent out, and there's an accidental pregnancy, there's a child born, something happens, and the child's left alone. So for the timeline of this, it's very confusing because, and my biggest gripe with the book, even though the rest of it is great, the format the book's written in is mostly in things like letters and emails, which might not be your cup of tea. I don't mind it, so it didn't bother me. There is also something that bothered me with the romance in the book, or the potential romance that turned into a romance. I'll get into that too. But back to the timeline. So it's never really clear when this girl, was left alone, because she's 16 or 17. 16, I think the book says. I think she just had her 16th birthday at the beginning of the book. And in some cases in the book, it sounds like she's only been alone for maybe a year or two. But then there's other instances in the book where she's recalling memories or conversations, and it sounds like she's been alone since she was 4 or 5 years old. And I don't know if this is maybe because her parents died at different times, but then it also sounds like that there was like one major thing that killed them both, and they both died at the same time. So it's never really clear exactly how her parents died and what time that frame they died in. So in instances in the book, you're like, okay, yeah, she's been alone for whatever, 2 years, or I think at one point in the book it even says it's 3 years. But then everything else written about the incident completely contradicts that. So maybe I'm missing something, I'm not sure. Here nor there, though, this is where the framing of the book is really affected by the timeline, because you can't tell me that it took NASA, okay, big space agency, a minimum or maximum of 12 years to send a rescue vessel. You're telling me that both her parents died when she was 3 or 4 years old, and she's been a commander of the ship since she was then, which kudos to her. And they're just now, like 12 years or 10 years later, sending a rescue vessel. You would think that they would have something on standby if they're sending explorers off into the unknown, even if it's just a plan on paper. Tell me it took them 12 years to organize a rescue. Now, if her parents died at different times and she's actually only been alone for 2 years, well, that's much more understandable. But the book's never clear. And when you think it's being clear, it contradicts. So that was my first gripe with it, and probably why I didn't rate it even a 4-star rating. I think I gave it like 2.5 or 3. The other thing is the romance in it. Again, context. She's 16, kind of going on 17 by the end of the book, I think, because the book takes place over about a year. The romantic interest that there's tension in that with, and this relationship with, is 24. 16 to 23, 24. Some people may get off on that. I do not. So that killed it for me right there. But maybe some people enjoy that kind of thing. So we'll just let that be that. But be forewarned, there is underage and legal age romance kind of shit going on. And yeah, I almost DNF'd it just for that. As soon as his age came out, I was like, yeah, no. But I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't because it was okay. Then I went into the Caravel trilogy. I'll try and hold them all up, but I don't know if I can. These are big books. There, I'm going to cover my face. These three. The Caravel trilogy by Stephanie Garber. Now, this was, when I said I read half a book, this one right here. I've read half of this. The first book was okay. It was a really good intro, really good building up. I didn't particularly like Scarlet as a character. She's the older sister of the duo. But given the situation and all the stuff that happened, I could overlook her just being irritating. Because I much rather like Donatella. And in the whole trilogy, over the whole arcing, I loved the younger sister Donatella way more than I did Scarlet. And I found myself skipping a lot of Scarlet or speed reading it. So the first book was primarily on Scarlet. I almost didn't finish the trilogy because I was like, oh my God, if I got to follow this chick for 3 books. But I didn't have to, thank God. The ending hooked me, which was why I picked up Legendary. Now this one switches focus and Donatella becomes the main character. I enjoyed this one so much more. And this is probably my favorite book out of the whole trilogy, because I'm getting to finale. So much stuff happens in this book with intrigue and, relationships and all that stuff. Really good setup for the third book too, especially with how it ends. But it switches focus, follows Donatella, which thank God it's probably the only reason I continued on with the trilogy. Scarlet is in here, but she's kind of a back burner character. Then we get to finale. So finale, again, takes a completely different tone from the first 2 books and tries to focus a little bit more on like the romance than the intrigue. And the romance is very angsty and just, yeah. So that was my biggest struggle. I got halfway through and I'm debating on DNFing it. I kind of want to finish it because I did finish the first 2. And I do find Stephanie Garber's writing the second half, like the second act of her books, does tend to be a lot stronger than the first act. I saw that in the other 2 books. I'm hoping this one follows the same vein. But I've read half of it, and I'm really struggling to pick it up to see if that's actually the case. So I don't know when I'm going to finish this, if I'm going to finish it. If I DNF it, I'll put it in a video. If I end up finishing it, I'll let you know my final thoughts. That could be months down the road, though. I think it's going to be my coffee table book for the foreseeable future. For those that don't know, coffee table book in my house is what we call the book that we pick up, read maybe a chapter of or 2 chapters, and then put on the coffee table, and it stays there for days on end until we feel like picking it up again. So that's my thoughts on that trilogy so far. I don't really have too much more to say of it at this point. Now, my favorite read, and probably my first 5-star reads of the year, and this is an older trilogy, so you don't hear about it a lot. And with older YA, there's usually a lot of problematic stuff that starts to come up, especially when it gets 5-6 years old. This is about 5 years old, but this didn't have that. It was the Snow Like Ashes trilogy. The story starts off, it seems like it's going to be very simple. That's how your first book starts off. Okay? There's this overarching empire. He's evil. He's conquering everything. He's enslaved this nation. The royal heir. I'm going to try and be spoiler free. Is on the run and running a resistance. The whole typical. We've seen it from everything from Star Wars to frickin' Narnia and everything in between. That's kind of how it starts. And you're like, okay, whatever. It's going to be another lost heir trying to regain their throne sort of book. But then this people is how you world build a book and character build a series, or world build a series and character build in books. By the time you get to the second book, there are so many plot twists that have happened here that carry over into here. You meet new characters, characters live, characters die, characters move on, characters, like it, I'm not going to say who, again, spoilers, but they're in there. This book, this was the setup. This book did not at all suffer middle book syndrome, where the second book is like, oh my God, please end so I can read the third. This book didn't suffer that at all. It's just one, it's like the author just wrote one big story and then had to split it up, because if she published it all in one book, the book would be massively huge and no one would ever read it. So this one, again, carries on. There's some more plot twists. There's a lot of things that happen that you get to see a lot of the characters really grow into, from kids where they're kind of in here, you know, they're 16 or so. This is a YA, and seems to be 16 is a magical age. But they're still very much children trying to survive in an adult world torn apart by war. In this book, you get to see the choices these kids have to make, and the adults too, and how they come from these, if you want to say, kids just following along with the adults, to the future generation that is the ones making the decision. They're having to come to terms with the decision and the consequences that those decisions have. Sometimes the decisions are good, sometimes the decisions are bad, but there's always consequences. And finally, in this whole trilogy, we have a ruler that freaking thinks of their country first and not their loins. So many of them do. That's a pet peeve of mine. I'm going to try and not rant, but it's not in this book, so I'm not going to rant in this video. Then you get to the third book, and this is just accumulation of everything. And this is very much a coming of age book, and the handing of the torch, the bad shit's done, happy ending, fairy tales, all that stuff. But it's not fairy tales. And it's very much the surviving older people are having to realize that these kids aren't kids anymore. They're now young, they're now adults, they're young adults. And you see a shift in, especially Sir, who's one of the primary main characters, in him, where he doesn't have to be this commander anymore. He doesn't have to be this father anymore. Now he can step back and just be a mentor and a guide. You see Mira and Mather and Sertawin, who are primarily what the stories are centered around. And you see how the choices they've made and the consequences of those choices, and how those choices and those consequences have shaped, because these are rulers, the whole world, not just their own people. And how they, at the end of this book, and the whole trilogy as a whole, really step up and come into themselves as people, and come into themselves as rulers, and come into themselves for the betterment of their whole world, because they are the next generation. They are the generation that is now going to be in control, and they take that very seriously. They have their relationships. There is romance in here, and I can say I'm happy with how the romance went. It was very slow burn. It was very subtle, because the story is not primarily about the romance. The story is about the world, the condition the world is in, and the power that the younger generation has to change that world for the better. And the main characters are not these over-the-top, all-powerful beings. They are humans with powers, some without powers. And I can go on forever, but this book trilogy as a whole, there are moments that you're laughing. There are moments that you're just engrossed in what's going to happen. I mean, it's going to end happily. Of course it is. It's a YA trilogy, or book in general. But you get so engrossed and you have those moments where you doubt, oh my God, like, is this going to like suddenly take Game of Thrones turn? Like, what the frick? And then there's moments where it takes your heart out of your chest and it squeezes it up in a tiny little ball and rips it all to shreds, and you find yourself sobbing for these people on paper. So if you want an emotional roller coaster ride, if you want something that you can just sink your teeth into and balls to the walls, just read it beginning to end, no stop. This whole trilogy, which I have in the wrong order. Sorry. This trilogy right here, first book, second book, third book, go for it. This is an amazing series. I do recommend probably the audiobook for the Snow Like Ashes trilogy. I partly read it on audiobook, partly actually physically read it because of things going on. I found doing it simultaneously really fun, but the audiobook for that is very good. So if you're into audiobooks, that is a recommendation that I would make. They are longer audiobooks though, so just be aware of that. I think that's where I am for March. Actually, you know what? Future Iceland here. I am not going to end the video there. Where I am going to end the video is on actually a slightly more serious note, and you can watch this part of the video if you want or not. I'm going to be brief, but I just want to very much touch base about the happenings going around and just the chaos and everything that we're seeing. Our homes, our communities, our world is not as safe as it used to be. I know I've been feeling the pressure of it. I'm sure a lot of people have. There are a lot of areas in the world that are worse off than mine. I mean, we do have it bad here, but I think so far we have been blessed in our community. I don't know what the future will bring, and that's probably the scariest part of all this. But I just want to reach out real quick. There's lots of people who can articulate positivity a lot better than I can. But I want to encourage people to look for the positive in things. Look for the light in things. Don't be an asshole to your neighbor, please. We're all in this boat together. And some days it feels like that boat is sinking very, very fast. And other times it feels like we're barely staying afloat. And I guess that's just all I wanted to say is take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. Take care of your communities. It's your community that you're going to find your strength in. I know with social distancing, isolation, all the stuff that we have to do to make our community safe again, it's very hard to be members, if you want to say, of a community closely. Find ways to still manage to reach out to people, friends, family, strangers, whether it's sharing a joke on social media, whether it's sharing funny cat videos or dog videos, whether it's being a creative and posting a video, being a book lover and talking about the things that we love. All of this does help. It might not seem like it. There's a lot of darkness right now. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of people being selfish and media hype on the negative. And sometimes we just need to take time. We need to take time to step back from that, to turn the news off, to turn off the updates that we're getting, and just focus on what's important around us. And that is our friends, that is our families, that is our communities that we're part of, whether they're online, whether they're physical, whether they're in your town or not. No matter of our race, our gender, our location, our religion. None of that matters. I mean, it does matter. Of course it matters. It's who we are. But when it comes to something like this, the COVID-19 that we're all facing all around the world, and it's affecting everybody, that is when it doesn't matter. That is when we need to pull together as a human race. We need to spread positivity, spread light, spread awareness, and just do our parts and make sure we support others in doing their parts. That took a little bit of a serious tone. I'm not, again, the best at articulating, but I hope that my message is getting across. For everyone out there, bless you, no matter your belief system, whatever. I'm just throwing out there. Stay safe. Try and find the happiness. Try and find the light. Try and just help your communities. Help your people. We are all people, and we all deserve the same amount of respect and health and everything. So that's all I have to say at the end of this. Goodbye for now. I will try and keep videos later in the future, but I do believe that this is something I had to touch on, and I really felt like I had to do it. So see you in the next video.